Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Minneapolis Regional Chamber Issues and Insights Legislative Webinar for February. We will get started in just a minute, but I will give everyone some time to file in virtually and get settled, and then we'll be back with you in just a moment. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the February Issues and Insights Legislative Webinar. We will get started in just a moment. Okay, everyone, good morning again. Welcome to the Minneapolis Regional Chamber Issues and Insights Legislative Webinar for February. We're happy to have you with us this morning. Our agenda will be mostly as it normally is. We'll do our legislator question, and then we're going to allow a few of our sponsors to just have a moment to speak to their business. And we wanted to do this to, one, thank our sponsors, but two, recognize that in our virtual world right now, sponsorship is a little bit of a different proposition. We all miss a little bit of the one-on-one interaction. So we did want to give our sponsors just a moment each to speak to you this morning, and we'll probably continue doing this for the next few months. Then we're happy to be joined by the President and CEO of Meet Minneapolis, Melvin Tennant, and he's been really on the front lines of the last year of the pandemic, and he's going to talk to us about his work. And then we will do Q&A and wrap up. And to start our legislator elected official question of the day, we're asking our legislators, what is your reaction to Governor Walz's budget proposal? And I know we have one mayor with us this morning. I've given him the green light to either answer that question or talk about a priority for their city. And so without any further ado, I'm gonna start with Senator Steve Swedzinski.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for starting with me. I think, yeah, the budget, as a former educator, I think it's got wonderful things for public schools. And so as soon as I read through and poured through his proposal last week, lots of things jumped out to me. And so the 1% and 2.5% increases over the next 2 years for the funding formula is wonderful. I think I know there's $1 million for mental health of our teachers to figure out why 1/3 of our educators leave after the first 5 years. This is a step in the right direction. Summer school for our students, not just the students who are struggling, but the students that want to get ahead of where they were because of COVID. And so the only really complaint I have about the governor's budget is he's increased state park entrance fees. And I think if there's a silver lining to COVID, we've realized that people are screaming to get outdoors and get back on the trails and see the attractions of our state parks. The parking lots have been full on some weekends in our state parks because of that. And it seems like a bad time to increase the fees when so many people are clamoring to get outside. So that's my one and only complaint with the governor's budget, is to increase the state parks. And I applaud his efforts to invest in our kids, in our state's future, by investing in our most precious resource, our children. And as long as I got the floor, if I could just say, yesterday I was in a Zoom call with someone that said, our kids have lost a year of learning, quote unquote. And to me, it was like fingernails on a chalkboard. For you younger participants in today's meeting, I would say it was like using permanent marker on a smartboard. And what a horrible thing to say to our teachers, that there's been a year of learning. They've stepped up, and they've never worked harder, in my opinion, in their careers. And so it was a different year, but to call it a lost year, I would hope that if you hear somebody say that phrase, that you ask them why they think the kids lost a year of learning. So anyways, thank you, John Paul.
Senator, thank you very much. Now I'm going to go to one of our mayors, Tim Bussey, who's the mayor of Bloomington.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. Senator, thanks for your comments. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Thank you so very much. My reaction to the Governor Walz's budget proposal, I think like every budget proposal, it's a good start. And I think there's a lot of good things in there, and I'm sure it will be subject to a little bit of give and take in the legislature, and you fully expect that. I am disappointed. We seem to have used up all of our complete budget for mild winter days. We used it all up in January, apparently. And now we're in a deficit situation here in February. We got to do something about that. The one thing that I really do want to talk about is the governor's proposal to bring forward $35 million to make sure that public safety activity and issues that affect the region, that affect the state, are funded by the state. And I think that's absolutely critically important. And want to speak as a community that both shares services around the Twin Cities and relies on communities around us to come and help us in an event of an emergency or a public safety issue. Couldn't agree more with the governor's contention that this is a region-wide, a statewide issue, and we really need to address it in that way. I don't think we can carve out or section out one city and look at one area or one specific public safety issue over another. We're in this all together, and what happens as a region, what happens in one city affects us all. And I think we need to step up and take responsibility for that. And I'm fully in favor of this as I said, as a community that both provides mutual aid to other cities and receives mutual aid for other cities. I think it's a strong proposal, and it's a step in the right direction. And it's an acknowledgement that this is a region-wide issue that needs to be addressed on a region-wide basis.
Mayor, thank you. And yeah, I must be remiss if I didn't recognize that this is a top legislative priority for the Minneapolis Regional Chamber. And so we appreciate you speaking to that as well. I do think we have a couple legislators coming from another event. So I'm going to move forward with the sponsor portion. And if we have legislators pop on, then I will revisit the legislator question before we get to Melvin Tennant. But thank you, Senator Swedzinski. Thank you, Mayor Bussey, for your comments. Now I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Premier sponsors CenterPoint Energy. Our sustaining sponsors are Goff Public, MRA, Weber Johnson, and Wells Fargo. And our media sponsor is Finance and Commerce. And we're very grateful for our sponsors that make this programming possible. And now we're going to hear a little bit more from Tiffany Jordan with CenterPoint Energy.
Good morning, and I hope everyone's staying warm out there. Thanks for the opportunity to share a few words about CenterPoint Energy this morning. Public policy issues have an impact on nearly everything we do, both personally and as it relates to business activities. So it's our pleasure to be one of the co-sponsors of this Issues and Insights series. For over 150 years, CenterPoint Energy has been meeting Minnesota energy needs, delivering the safe, reliable, affordable natural gas our customers count on to heat their homes and run their businesses. We remain committed to this essential mission, but we're now also pursuing innovative clean energy solutions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. As a company, we've established carbon reduction goals, and we're moving forward with a number of exciting initiatives. For example, we continue to offer an extensive menu of efficiency programs to help our customers reduce their energy use, save money, and shrink their own carbon footprint. We're upgrading and replacing aging portions of our distribution system, reducing gas leakage by 25% over the past 10 years. We recently received approval from the Public Utility Commission to let Minnesota producers of renewable natural gas, known as RNG, access our system. We're also working on a pilot in Minneapolis to create green hydrogen, and that's using renewable electricity to essentially split water molecules apart, creating oxygen that will be released to the atmosphere, and carbon-free hydrogen that will be blended with traditional natural gas. We're also working with the Minnesota legislator on the Natural Gas Innovation Act And if passed, this will give utilities the opportunity to invest more in innovative clean energy projects like RNG and green hydrogen. Again, thanks for the opportunity to share some information with you this morning. Have a great day and stay warm.
Tiffany, thank you. Next up is Goff Public, and we have Heidi Larson with us this morning.
Good morning. My name is Heidi Larson. I'm the CFO and a principal at Goff Public, a full-service public relations and government relations firm. As a small business owner myself, I'm very aware of the challenges businesses have faced during the pandemic. Our firm has helped clients navigate new topics and issues brought on by the pandemic, and also help them communicate about sensitive topics during the civil unrest following George Floyd's killing. I appreciate the Chamber hosting this webinar about the hospitality industry and how it's been impacted. And as a communications professional, I know how hard it is to hold people's attention virtually, so I'll go ahead and pass it on to the next speaker. Thank you.
Heidi, thank you very much. Next, we have Kathy Packard with MRA.
Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's staying warm. So MRA, if you're having trouble finding qualified workers, if you're having difficulty figuring out challenges of state and federal labor laws, if you're having difficulty retaining your employees, or if you are just making sure that your employees have the right skills, then that's why you need MRA. We're your total HR resource. We can help address all of your challenges. We have content that is built. We have HR advisors that are experienced HR advisors, 15 years of experience, and it's a 24/7 hotline. We have over 1,500 learning events each year, and we have HR experts that can come on site to your location, step in and do that work for you. So we always like to say to our member companies, just remember, if you have humans, we have resources. And in the immortal words of Forrest Gump, that's all I've got to say about that.
Kathy, thank you. And thank you again to all of our sponsors. And want to reiterate, we recognize that sponsorship is different in a virtual world, and we appreciate your support more than ever. Now we will introduce our keynote speaker, Melvin Tennant. He's the president and CEO of Meet Minneapolis. Melvin oversees the day-to-day operations of Meet Minneapolis, including the professional staff and support staff. Melvin serves as the voice of Meet Minneapolis through speaking engagements, civic activities, and political council meetings. He has served as president and CEO of Meet Minneapolis since November 2007. Melvin is also the executive director of Sports Minneapolis. So Melvin, thank you for being with us this morning. Melvin's going to share his screen, so we'll take a moment to say hi and also give him a moment to share his presentation. Appreciate
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
And I will stay while Melvin's getting his presentation up. If you have questions as he goes, feel free to put them in the Q&A function or the chat function. I will monitor that. And then when Melvin has completed his presentation, we'll have a little time for Q&A.
So John Paul, is that the proper way that it's being viewed?
Yeah, it looks good.
All right, just want to make sure.
Yep.
Well, good morning. Good morning. Thank you all for allowing me to share some of the stories about how the hospitality industry has experienced the pandemic and the associated economic downturn. We've all experienced it in different ways, and I believe the hospitality industry experience is very different. I heard a statistic recently that said that 4 out of the 10 jobs lost nationally during the pandemic were hospitality industry jobs. So that's very devastating. We are going to share some of those stories, but also we want to leave you with a message of hope, because there is certainly hope with regard to how we're going to survive this and proceed forward. As I am, there we go. So obviously, this is a word that we've seen a lot: unforeseen, not anticipated or predicted, and we could all fill in the blanks with what that means to each of us over the last year. Quick question: what would you tell your March 16th, 2020 self? Again, we can all fill in the blanks there, but might it be it's okay to get a puppy, or things that we might want to stock up on, or don't bother getting new pants? Again, we all have our stories about how we would be able to respond if indeed we had the opportunity to speak to our March 16th self. And March 16th for Meet Minneapolis was the first day of our journey of working completely virtually as an organization, and we have not been fully back in our offices since then. So today I'd like to break out the presentation into several categories: an organizational review of the organization Meet Minneapolis, look at 2020, the unforeseen impact and action with regard to George Floyd's killing, social justice in Meet Minneapolis, then looking at that from the lens of the tourism and meetings industry and the impact on the hospitality industry. And as I said, we're looking forward to an industry recovery and a stronger Minneapolis and the plans we have regarding recovery. So, who's Meet Minneapolis? Been in business since 1987, a 501c6, very much like the Chamber Business Association, 55 staff members. That represents a 21% reduction in staff from the start of 2020. We have a board of 35, and typically we would be an 80-20 public-private organization with our city contract. This is our mission: to positively impact the economic and social prosperity of our community. And jobs is very important. Supporting jobs, creating jobs. We have organizational values that we try to live by. We're very proud of the fact that our team came together recently to expand these values. The value that we added most recently is service. We have a spirit to serve. These are our core services. We market and promote the destination. We sell Minneapolis directly. We have a very robust sales department. It's important for us also to enhance the visitor experience so that visitors will want to come back. We have a number of ways in which we reach out to our community and our various stakeholders. We have stakeholders just like the Chamber does in many, many sectors, public and private, and also our internal business operations. That's how we are organized as an organization. And how do we know we're successful? In a typical year, pre-pandemic, these were the areas that were determining how we were moving the needle with regard to the hospitality industry, securing group and event room nights. We're also responsible for the revenue at the MCC, the Minneapolis Convention Center. Through those efforts, we're responsible for increasing lodging taxes, and the private partners, organizations that support us financially, we have to certainly retain those businesses. So again, going back to 2019, a very, very successful year. Those 4 key performance indicators that I just mentioned, we achieved all 4 of those. 2019, again, lots of successes. We were responsible for bringing in almost 800 events, 349 hosted specifically at the convention center, nearly 900,000 convention attendees. Then we certainly saw within the drop of a hat, things did change. We began to evolve as an organization from just marketing the destination to also being responsible for aspects of the destination, such as the assets that we're responsible for selling, the infrastructure, actually the governance, also legislative issues. So we're beyond being just the marketing destination for the city. So with regard to the impact of George Floyd, social justice, and how it impacted Meet Minneapolis, we started out with a bold statement as an organization, a message to the community saying that we stand in solidarity with not just the Black community, but our entire community, and recognize the need for transforming Minneapolis from the inside out. We made strong statements both locally to our stakeholders, but also to our customers. We go out and recruit conventions through the various professionals that are responsible for planning those meetings and events, and they certainly appreciated hearing directly from us how we felt about that tragedy back on May 25th of 2020. The global spotlight, people would have thought that the entire community was on fire. We clearly had devastation in some major neighborhoods and corridors of our community. And we see some of those headlines there. Those are the ways that our community was being defined for some time. We also know from research that the vast majority of people are familiar with the fact that George Floyd died here, but also that 2/3 of those polled believe that the protests that followed were an appropriate response. Also within the global spotlight, we saw that our disparities were highlighted. We know that they exist as successful a community as we are. Numerous disparities exist in employment and housing and in many, many other ways. And that was very well chronicled in our media. Then we also received a lot of attention for the discussions on defunding the police. And I'll just give you a quick sidebar that once we saw those headlines, many of our customers began to ask us the questions and had concerns about bringing their events here. And so we've had a very robust communication strategy to clarify what the defunding the police means, and we continue to update that information to our clientele, our various stakeholders. Another area we found is that we continue to communicate about the reputation of the city. In fact, we have a huge reputation management initiative that's underway with various organizations, including the Chamber, for this year. But obviously, from the way that the news media has portrayed us over the last few months, you can see that it's necessary for us to respond to those news reports. Obviously, looking at a news story from last November where it's talking about the increase in Minneapolis crime, those are questions that you can imagine that meeting and event planners will have, and we continue to try to respond to those as honestly as we can. But as I said, there's always hope. We've come together as a community and begun to respond in a very forceful and unified manner. So starting internally, we're going to share with you how Meet Minneapolis has responded by engaging our team, analyzing and refining our business practices, and not just establishing, but expanding our community involvement. I do want to spend just a moment about how some of these initiatives evolved from our team. You can just imagine that the job that we have is not just a typical job, but we are actually stewards of the brand. We are responsible for communicating the assets of our destination to our numerous stakeholders. And when George Floyd was killed, our team experienced that on numerous levels, not just as humans. Some of us who are people of color experience it in a certain way, but also by being the professionals responsible for marketing the destination. So we started with a staff discussion that lasted 2 hours, where everybody expressed their feelings and emotions about what had happened on May 25th. We began then communicating daily with our team, and there was an immediate desire for all of our team to get involved. We extended paid volunteer hours as an organization to allow our staff to do that. With regard to analyzing and refining our business practices, we expanded the ways in which we communicated the vast, diverse businesses that we promote to our various visitors. There is vast content on our various communication channels that reflects the diversity of the community. And we have an even greater commitment to doing that now. With regard to an internal committee that was started, the Meet Minneapolis Legacy Project, again, born of the response of the staff, clients, and industry following the death of George Floyd. Really, the mission of this group is to develop targeted social justice and racial reconciliation initiatives for our team, as well as the broader hospitality industry. And this has really taken off. We have had a number of great successes in terms of community outreach, but also communicating internally and expanding the horizons of our staff and also of our board and stakeholders. So what does this mean now for the business that we're in, which is to talk about returning to pre-pandemic levels? Let's look at what we were as an industry before 2020, and then the quick and devastating impact that we experienced. Statewide, travel and tourism hospitality, the 6th largest employer in Minnesota, 14.1 billion in visitor spending, statewide over 150,000 jobs. Here in Minneapolis, that visitor spending was almost 8 billion and almost 35,000 jobs, 4th largest employer. 1 out of 10 jobs in Minneapolis prior to the pandemic was in the hospitality industry. And what I'll further say is that we don't just simply market and sell what is inside our city limits. If we look at the region, we work very closely with our counterparts in St. Paul and Bloomington and all of the other communities within the region. And if you looked at the region in terms of visitor spending, almost 2/3 of the statewide visitor spending occurs right here in our region. We had a decade of growth in terms of number of visitors to the region. We had almost eclipsed 35 million, again, pre-pandemic. Visitor spending, we spoke about that. Year-over-year records. And jobs growth, generally uptrending for the last 10 years pre-pandemic. Then when we turned to 2020, we saw from the group business for Meet Minneapolis, over the course of the entire year, we saw nearly 400 groups cancel. And you can see by week with this line graph, at the very beginning of the pandemic in March of 2020, we had a spike of events that were canceled, and it remained pretty steady for the course of the year. I have a very strong memory of on the Friday, it was a Friday the 13th, Friday the 13th, the auto show was going on in the convention center. And with the onset of the pandemic, they ended up having to close the auto show down early. But many other events had also been canceled. We see hotel occupancy. The lines are hard to read, but they are, the dark one at the top is the US, then Minnesota, then Metro, and then the lowest line is Minneapolis specific in terms of how hotel occupancy declined starting in March of 2020. In fact, Minneapolis has been hit harder than almost any other metro area in the country. And year over year, we lost nearly over 1.6 million total rooms based on what we would have typically expected to have been consumed in our community. This shows you how previous crises have impacted hotel occupancy. 9/11, the financial crisis of 2008. The bottom line is that we have been typically, we've recovered quicker in other crises, but as you can see with the line starting at the bottom, going to the bottom of year one, we have really hit bottom, and it's going to take probably 3 to 4 years for us to recover. And to kind of give you a bit of a narrative on what that means, in March, late March, early April of 2019, we hosted the Final Four. So we compared that week of hotel occupancy and performance to that same week in 2020. I know this chart is very busy, but basically what we want to share with you is that year over year, hotel performance was down nearly 100% because in late March, early April, during the Final Four, hotel occupancy was basically 100% for that Friday through Monday. That same week in 2020, hotel occupancy was 2 to 3%. Devastating. But what are we doing about it? Again, we can't just sit still as an industry and allow things to continue to happen, but we've taken some bold action. We knew that since visitors weren't really traveling, people were concerned about travel because of government regulations and just their own sense of wanting to stay at home and not risk being infected by through the pandemic. We knew that people weren't traveling from other cities, so we began a lot of local tourism marketing, working on giving people information on takeout meals, just really trying to make people feel comfortable at home until we could really begin our normal marketing initiatives. We also worked to put together a local rallying cry to get our local community to support local businesses, the We Need Us campaign, and basically it is to support the small businesses that support us back. You may have seen some of these billboards or other manifestations of this campaign throughout the community, particularly along Lake Street and on West Broadway. Again, knowing that meeting planners were reluctant to proceed with meetings, we knew that we had to provide information in a way in which they wouldn't feel pressured. So basically, when you're ready was the tagline that we used to make sure that we were able to provide the information that meeting and event planners needed when they were ready to begin planning meetings again, and that has been very successful. We also expanded a monthly State of the Tourism and Hospitality Industry webinar for our partners, another resource we provided to give people the latest information on when recovery would begin. Another area is additional certification on making sure that the visiting public knows that we're taking the proper steps to ensure safety of health. And the GBAC, the Global Biorisk Advisory Council, many of our facilities here locally, hotels, as well as our Minneapolis Convention Center, have received this certification. So what about industry recovery? What are we doing to get us back on track as an industry? The two things that are top of mind for us, as well as other business associations, are the two V's, the verdict and the vaccine. And so we're going to break that down into a look at reputation management, advocacy for the industry, support for BIPOC businesses, driving from demand for leisure travel, and what do hybrid meetings look like? Because that is going to remain a component well into the future, even when we have vaccine and we've got the pandemic behind us, hybrid meetings, some people in person, some people virtually, that's going to be a reality in our industry. So just to give you an idea of looking forward into 2021, this is a list of new hotel openings, new and upcoming hotel openings. So we, in spite of the pandemic and the economic downturn, we are anticipating another 1,600 hotel rooms between now and probably the end of 2022. And that is where all of those hotels are going to be geographically. At the bottom left, where you see the 4 domes, that is the Minneapolis Convention Center. I'll just say a little bit of a commentary. None of those hotels are particularly near the convention center. That continues to be an area that we're focused on, is how we can secure more hotel rooms near the convention center to support our group business. But we're glad that we have these hotels that are coming into our community. So we know that COVID vaccines bring hope, but not necessarily new meetings. As the message here says, the primary focus remains on rescheduling. Lots of, we talked about the 385, almost 400 conventions and meetings that had been canceled. The good news is that about a quarter of those have been retained and rescheduled for future dates. And we're continuing to see that movement as, but not quite as much movement as people become a little bit more secure in planning meetings with the onset of the coming of the vaccine. So what about the future? What do we hope our December 31, 2021 self will see and experience this year? We hope that we'll, at that point, be able to experience the new Dayton's project on Nicollet. That we'll see a large number of the over 200,000 workers who work in downtown Minneapolis come back, as well as the visitor traffic that we're very, very much missing right now. We'll be eating lunch in the newly renovated Crystal Court at the IDS building. Live music at one of our great live music venues, like First Avenue, that just celebrated its 50th year, if you can believe that. Looking forward to having those venues back open. Dining without social distancing, that'll be great. Attending many of our signature events, very much looking forward to that. Cheering our favorite teams with real people, not just cutouts, unless you paid to have your cutout and you're amongst that group right there. And of course, things like being back on the roof over at Brits, enjoying lawn bowling. We hope to somehow be able to enjoy Hamilton this summer. In our theater district, would love to see that revitalized. That's what we hope to be able to experience by the time we get into 2022. And for us, in the hospitality industry, a return to in-person meetings. And we are moving in that direction. So we're, again, very optimistic about what the future holds. And finally, we want to be able to say that we have a safe and equitable city where everyone feels welcome and can succeed. So with that, I'll pause and see if there are any questions.
Melvin, thank you. That was fantastic. I will start with David Lair asked a question. Says, excellent presentation, Melvin, full of meaningful data and relevant action plans. His question is, are there specific plans to highlight improvements to racial disparity issues for the upcoming anniversary of George Floyd's killing?
Well, we have been, well, thank you for the question. And yes, those are ongoing discussions. We talked about in the presentation, the reputation management aspect of how we're marketing the city. And we're working on that with the chamber, with the downtown council, other organizations. Those plans are all coming together, but we understand that George Floyd's death was tragic, but it was also a call to action for our community. And that is the approach that we're taking, is that we know that that was a terrible, terrible act that happened, but it also gives us an opportunity to be leaders in terms of changing the way in which social justice and equity are discussed. So I can't say that there's specific plans, but that is clearly a priority to make sure that we highlight the commitment that our community has to social justice. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Kind of along the reputation management side, how are you messaging the public safety component of the tourism discussion when you have meeting planners approaching Meet Minneapolis?
Well, first and foremost, we have to be honest and authentic. We actually have on occasion meeting and event planners that find media, New York Times articles or wherever that talk about our crime and safety, and we work to try to put that in context. We can't sweep it under the rug, but we also know that many of the issues that we're facing as a community are also being faced in other communities across the country. We don't try to hide from that, but like you were saying, John Paul, we want to highlight the positives that are being made. We know that during the fall last year, there was a big initiative with Mad Dads that was working along Nicollet. We know that we've had great cooperation with MPD from Hennepin County Sheriff's Office and from other jurisdictions. So we know that as they say, it takes a village to make sure that we're able to resolve this. I know there was it's nothing that we would necessarily want to communicate to a meeting planner, but it was certainly a successful venture with the Sheriff's Office and the State Patrol with the carjacking initiative that they were able to have a few weeks ago. So it's about being honest and putting things in context. The good news about our industry is that we have relationships with many of these meeting and event planners. These are not one and done. We have a lot of groups that come here on a regular basis, so they want to come back here. They know about us. They know that this is not the way in which we typically are as a city. So the good news is that we have an opportunity to, if you will, plead our case.
Yeah, and maybe a fun looking back question, since we're talking about some of these larger events. When you look at the Super Bowl in 2018 versus the Final Four in 2019, can you talk about the scale of those events? How do they compare to one another?
Right. Super Bowl was a larger event just by its very nature, and lots of moving pieces. Just to put it in perspective, the dollars raised to host it, the private dollars raised were over $50 million, and the Final Four was probably less than half of that. I don't recall the exact number. The number of volunteers required for the Super Bowl was a bit larger than the Final Four, but each of those events did help define us as a major destination. And if you look back even as far as 2014, when we began to host really major events in this era with the All-Star Game and other major events, we have a lot that we're very proud of. But to answer your question specifically, Super Bowl was significantly larger, but they both of those events clearly help define us as a major event destination.
Yeah, thank you. And when you're looking forward, are there specific parts of the hospitality tourism industry you kind of see as maybe being building blocks for the long-term hopeful return to normal with tourism in Minneapolis?
It really relates, yes. Thank you for asking me. It's small businesses and workers. We had the We Need Us campaign that I talked about in the presentation that was designed to help keep those small businesses energized until the visitor trade came back by getting local people to support those businesses, maybe to go to neighborhoods that they don't typically go to. I mean, there's such rich history and diversity along West Broadway and Lake Street, you know, in spite of what might be portrayed in the media. And of course, there was great devastation following the unrest, but a lot of great small businesses and restaurants and shops that we want to clearly keep those small businesses energized, but also the workers. We talked about the 36,000 workers that keep the promises that we make. Meet Minneapolis creates the vision, tells the visitors about the experience, but it's the workers that have to make it come to life. They're the ones that have to, that actually have the ability to influence the type of experience that a visitor has. We want to get those workers back on the job. And so as we bring in more events and can sustain employment in hotels, restaurants, and other places, that is a priority. Small businesses and workers.
Yeah, thank you for that. And obviously Minneapolis, you think just of downtown, but it's the greater MSP region, really, that has traditionally been a draw for events. What do you see when you look at the suburbs of Minneapolis? Obviously Bloomington plays a big portion in this. Is that an asset now where you can kind of leverage some of the opportunities for tourism and hospitality in the cities surrounding Minneapolis?
Yes, that's a great question, because when a visitor comes to our region, they don't really care what jurisdiction they're in. They want to have a nice time, and they may be at the Mall of America for Bloomington, or they may be in St. Paul for a Wild game. So we work very closely with our region, and just specifically on the sports side, there's a new entity that has been formed called Minnesota Sports and Events, which is a collaboration of Bloomington, St. Paul, and Minneapolis, as well as the professional sports and the University of Minnesota, to really look at our region as a single destination. So when we go after major events like Super Bowls or Final Fours or potentially Olympic movement types of events or other types of large scale events, we can do that in a coordinated fashion. So we have great cooperation, and we understand that there are assets all over the region that we want to expose visitors to.
Thank you. We have an audience question. How does transit transportation connect to the hospitality and destination services, especially given possible pullbacks due to COVID? Right.
Well, a visitor being able to get around the region is very important. Multiple means of transportation, whether it's a nice ride bike, whether it's the light rail. We are very much advocates of all forms of transportation, and I'll just speak to our friends with Metro Transit. Wes Koistra, the head of Metro Transit, is on our board of directors and is a great supporter. And one of our our greatest assets is the fact that a visitor can arrive at MSP International, jump on an LRT inside, get downtown in less than half an hour. And that is just a huge asset for us. So for us, transit is vitally important. So we're very much advocating for those assets that allow us to be able to promote the fact that you can get to virtually any venue in the region. And in fact, I hate to just talk about the sports, but if you think about all of the major sports venues are somewhere along an LRT line, whether you look at Target Center, Target Field, US Bank Stadium, all the venues at the University of Minnesota, obviously looking at Xcel Energy Center. Basically any major venue you can get to on some form of public transportation, and that is a great asset for us.
Thank you. Another audience question is, and this is a good one. Can you please share insights into what the convention of the future may look like in a post-pandemic world?
Sure. It's still evolving, but what I can tell you is that I've been to one industry convention. I went to one of our industry conventions called Meeting Professionals International. It took place in Arlington, Texas, at one of the Gaylord properties back in November. And there was a debate whether or not they were going to have it as a completely virtual event or as a hybrid event. They chose hybrid, and I got a chance to experience firsthand how they would do it. So they had the sanitizing stations. They made sure that every day you got a temperature check and a certain color wristband to show that you'd been checked for that day. Social distancing, spacing for all of the various events. Food service was done very carefully. So it's really elevated the level of awareness about health and safety for the industry, and these are practices that will continue. As I said during the presentation, I expect that meetings of the future will be hybrid. I can't tell you what percent of people will be live versus virtual, but you have to really take into account the fact that there is value in sometimes, I'm in the travel industry, not having to travel to go to a meeting. If you can stay in the comfort of your home or your office and not have to travel as much, some people might enjoy that. We certainly hope that more people decide that travel is a good thing, but we'll have a percentage of meeting attendees that will be virtual, and we're going to have to figure out what that new number, what that new normal is. I think a lot of organizations that plan meetings have had a history of a certain level of attendance, but in the future, they know that that level of attendance is going to be reduced by some factor, and it's too early to know exactly what that number is going to be.
Great, thank you. And I think that exhausts our questions. Thank you for your presentation. Thanks for answering the questions. Obviously, your leadership is so crucial right now to the recovery of Minneapolis's economy, but also to our region. So thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning.
And can I just say that I want to just make sure that that our viewers here know that the team that we have has just done wonderful things. We've had as I mentioned, a significant reduction in staffing, but each of these team members has really evolved into leaders in their own right. And I'm just so proud of the fact that we have continued to represent this industry, and again, very optimistic about the future. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Melvin. Thank you again for being with us this morning. I'm going to pop back up our presentation here. All right, and we have a few upcoming events we just wanted to highlight. Report to the community, Wednesday, February 24th, and this is a former Twin West event that really highlights the different pillars of work that Twin West had traditionally done, and now obviously with the merger, being part of the Minneapolis Regional Chamber, this will be a great opportunity to look at those pillars and look forward. Critical Issues event, February 26th, Path to Economic Recovery. And then in the South Metro, our public policy series, which is similar to this Issues and Insights webinar, we'll be talking about affordable housing. And Bloomington has really been a leader on this front, and we'll have a great conversation about homelessness, affordable housing, and kind of preserving affordable housing in our communities. So thank you again for joining us this morning. Another thank you to Melvin Tennant for being with us, our legislators, Mayor Bussey for being with us, and to our sponsors again, those who presented this morning, but all of our sponsors who support this programming. Margaret Anderson Kelleher will be joining us in April. We were going to hope to have her in March, but for schedule reasons, she's going to join us in April. We're looking to have a workforce update in March, and hopeful to have Deed Commissioner Steve Grove join us. So thank you again for being with us this morning, and wish everyone a happy Friday.